Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and respected professional and author from Brisbane, Australia, Mr. Paul Smith. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's absolute pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Paul is the founder of Future Directors. He's also known as a board futurist, and he's an author. And all of you know I'm very partial to authors. He's an author of two books, Right Seat, Right Table, and The Artificially Intelligent Boardroom. So, Paul, let's start straight away with asking you, what does it mean to be a board futurist? And how did you come to embrace this role?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question, and it's something I've still been exploring. I will always make one correction. The Artificially Intelligent Boardroom will be my third book, and it's not out yet.
Okay.
Just
Okay,
the
I
second
stand
book was
corrected.
I
Yeah.
was a co-author on one, but it's not as well known.
Okay.
So, board futurist really means preparing governance teams like boards,
Mhm.
so any decision-making bodies for the unexpected,
Mhm.
uh, keeping an eye on the emerging trends in technology, tools, techniques. And what I mean by techniques is decision-making techniques. So, how to get the best out of a team, a group of humans, and sort of the thinking, especially around, like I said, human performance. Um, I embraced this label, God, well over 5, 6 years ago now, when a dear friend of mine in this industry actually called me that. He said I was hosting a panel I was emceeing an event for Diligent, the big board software company, and he said, "Paul, you're a board futurist,"
Mhm.
and I went, "Oh yeah, that seems apt." As I had been witnessing the changing landscapes, I've been talking from this very futurism and sort of challenging the status quo space ever since I sort of really joined this industry well over 10 years ago as a voice in governance.
Amazing. And what, in your view, are some of the challenges boards face today to become future ready?
Oh, there's so many. It's really been hard to narrow that down. You've
Mhm.
obviously got all the external challenges, political shifts, technology, rapid technology change, and that's really come forward, accelerated in the last couple of years, obviously with AI just completely changing the landscape. Evolving stakeholder needs. I mentioned politics, political needs, stakeholders are one, but the customer, the staff, there's a whole bunch of different things and complex regulations, especially coming out of places like the EU.
Mhm.
And then I think there's this balancing tradition with innovation. Or like what do we hold on to the past and what
Mhm.
do we bring with us and how do we embrace a different way of doing things going forward? But I also think there's some internal challenges for the board directors themselves. The role's getting way more complex. There's far more liability involved, and the days of having a massive portfolio where you can sort of just turn up to meetings, I think that is being very heavily challenged as the role
Mhm.
becomes more complex and time consuming.
Mhm. And what are some of the common governance mistakes boards make that you have seen? And how can some of these be avoided?
Um, Great question. I go back to another anecdote, which I'll try and keep brief. When I first met a very good friend of mine, in this governance space, Matthew Fallbrook or Matt Fallbrook, somebody I'd recommend you have on this podcast if you
Mhm.
want another governance brain here again at some point. And we sort of talked about what the one thing that needs to change in all boardrooms in order for them to really move forward. And mindset was the biggest thing. So I think one of the biggest mistakes is having the wrong mindset in the boardroom,
Mhm.
not really understanding what you're there to do. And that might really seem really simple, but actually it's so fundamental. And having worked with hundreds of boards over the years, you do often see this lack of a growth mindset.
Mhm.
Like we can this open-mindedness type of things from a more structural perspective, not having really good decision making or governance frameworks in place. So sort of a lot of boards are making it up as they go along or flying by the seat of their pants and not actually having documented frameworks they can come back to around risk management, strategic development, compliance. And I think, God, of all the different ones you can do. How they compose their board is probably the biggest mistake. Too many boards are recruiting for like for like, and so you get these homogenous groups. They're not creating a culture, allowing for people to air their views, whatever they happen to be. So you get a lot of hidden wisdom that's below the surface. You might have come across the iceberg effect where, all the good stuff's below the surface or the majority. Creating a great culture with the right mindset, all the right tools, and the right board composition can help boards do what they're supposed to do, which is make great decisions.
Absolutely. But then a follow-up question for you is that how would you differentiate between good governance and great governance?
Yeah, I love this question. Good governance is sort of just steering, keeping the ship steady.
Hmm.
I think, if we use that sort of analogy of steering the ship. Whereas I think great governance, there's a vision, there's a resilience, there's a proactiveness around how they engage. And I think I like to think about the difference between a good sports team and a great sports team. A high performing team surrounds themselves with all the best people, the best support, and they really do think like a team, and they support one another as well as trying to individually become better. And I think that's also what defines good and great governance in that respect. Now, I've defined governance as the team of people doing it, in this
Yeah.
case the board, but you could define it as the best systems. But for me, corporate governance really is about the decisions we make within incorporated entities.
Hmm.
And in order to make great decisions, you need to be bringing in the right information and have the right minds around with all the right tools and techniques, as I mentioned beforehand, in that board future stuff, and all the right thinking and mindset in order to make decisions that are really resilient and going to stand the test of time.
What a great response. Thank you. Over the years, I have seen boards, I've sat on many, many boards. Board constitution keeps evolving.
Mm.
In one of the companies that I was involved in, there used to be a proper training or an induction program for fresh board members. I wanted to ask you, what skills and mindsets should modern day board members cultivate to remain relevant?
Um, This is again, I talked beforehand about the increasing complexity of the
Yeah,
role,
yeah.
and you used to have what would call more generalists in the boardroom. You've come from the C-suite, you've been doing lots of different roles, unless you're the finance or the legal type of mind. Although that tends to be the majority, you have this business background. You're now getting more specialists in the boardroom, but how many specialists can you handle? But with the way that technology is evolving, and as I said, the main thing about the boardroom is about how they make decisions. I think the modern board member is far more recruited for the human skills, or what we might be called the soft skills. Again, if we think about the tool that we use for it's up here, right? So it's the people who know how to train this,
Mm,
what's between our ears, and communicate, and they come at it with curiosity and open mind. What's what I call self-governance.
mm,
Like, how are we learning to perform at a really high level ourselves? Of course, we need digital literacy, technology literacy, strategic agility, and agility is a really key word there, and a far more collaborative, open minded approach to working with stakeholders. But there's another thing in there as well that I really like to see from board directors I'm hiring or I'm working with clients is this sense of a learner mindset. They're not coming in to give back everything they've learned. They're constantly learning new skills, new ideas,
right.
and it's not like I've got to the end of my career and I'm now starting the boardroom and it's all give back, give back. There is an element of that. The
Mm,
world doesn't know it that way. So a learner mindset's really, really critical as well.
right, right. Yeah, I've seen that so many times. People superannuate at whatever 60, 62, 65, and they say, now I'm looking for board positions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's pretty normal. And
yeah,
again, there's nothing wrong with that as
yeah.
long as they go into that thinking that I still need to keep learning. And again,
Mm,
if anything, the last few years has showed us that, as well as COVID. How to adapt to everything that's changing right in
mm.
front of us that we have no control over.
Correct, correct. Well said. There's another aspect that I wanted to get your perspective on, and that is there are a lot of regulatory uh, changes happening all over the world,
Mm.
including diversity, equity, inclusion. I'd love to get your perspective on how do you see governance evolving with regulatory changes and technological advancements?
Oh, it's such a tricky question, this one.
Mm,
One thing I think is a guarantee is that everyone's going to be behind technology. The regulators, boards, we are in a constant state of catching up. So I go back to what will be evolving will be the frameworks, the decision making frameworks around that, because we cannot keep up with the rate of change with technology unless we actually stop or slow that down. So again, I come back to the word agility. Boards need to be a more agile, they need to be tech savvy, they need to be intentional about how they're using things and how they're governing for it. I think a lot of work in this space, especially from an AI perspective, and I use that as a proxy for everything, is how do we govern for AI within our, how it's affecting our workforce, how it's affecting our business model, how it's affecting our strategy. But we've always got to keep one eye on how it's being used within the boardroom as well, and what regulations we sit under, knowing though that there's a there's a laggard effect here with most boards because they aren't tech savvy
mm,
yet, mostly,
mm,
and the regulators are behind. And there's not one universal way. I mentioned the EU is getting really heavy with AI and other regulation, and America seems to be tearing it back down again. It's fascinating. And look, with DEI or EDI or all the other different letters that are going there, and obviously that's a very heightened raw thing right now with everything that's coming out of the US. Um, I don't think any of those things are changing. All going to be seeing is a focus on different areas and a relabeling, and you can't stop that sort of progress from happening, which is opening up people to more than they've ever had beforehand. We won't be going back. We'll just be, relabeling what we're already doing. So I think for boards, thinking about who might be listening to this, having that agile mindset, keeping upskilled, keeping up to date with everything, but knowing that things could change very quickly, especially politically.
mm. Amazing. My next few questions are about artificially intelligent boardrooms. And you just
Mm.
mentioned that, important for board members to educate themselves. I'd love to get your thoughts on how should board members educate themselves about AI and its implications on governance.
Well, first of all, they can hire me. That's what some boards have
Absolutely.
been doing.
Yes.
I really enjoy coming in and playing with boards around AI. It's obviously very serious what's going on, but it's such a useful and powerful tool. Most importantly, it's like anything else: invest in training. Bring people in. I think the best way to do that is to bring people in to work with the board and the executive to upskill them and then show them how they can use it. Now, obviously, not every board has bottomless pit of resources. So bringing in advisors, sending people off to courses, reading books, it's that learning mindset of trying to stay up to date with AI's potential, with its risk. And as I mentioned, especially with AI, continuous learning is key because it is changing. You mentioned my book that I'm still writing. I finished it last year and then I had to throw out half the copy because it was out of date.
Right.
So me trying to rewrite it in a way that's going to last for a long time or a long enough time has been really tricky because, every month something new comes out that AI can do.
Correct. Correct. When I was reading about you and preparing for our conversation, I was fascinated by a phrase which said, the board of the future will be simultaneously more human and less human.
Yeah.
Help me understand this paradox and give me an example if you can.
Yeah, I this is my favorite quote of mine. It's pretty much something that drives everything that I do because I
Mm,
do have an obsession with the use of technology. Future Directors is a technology company. I'm writing about AI. I do keynotes about all these things. So that's the less human bit is how is technology coming into the boardroom and playing a far more active role rather than a passive role. But then on the more human side, it goes back to that self governance, that human performance, those human skills. We are being asked to do more with our cognitive abilities and be more mindful and more ethical and more aware of each other and ourselves and our own biases and use more techniques to bring that out. So, this is what I mean between us becoming more human
Mm.
in terms of high performance cognitive individuals and what's between our ears,
Right.
but also utilizing technology in the boardroom, hence the less human. So it's a balance between, behavioral dynamics and personal performance and using a technology, not just AI, to enhance what the board does, which is decision make.
Mm. And would you have an example of someone you may have worked at?
Oh
I
yeah.
don't want any names, of course, on how
Yeah, look, it's
how the transition
yes.
happened.
Yeah, like it's this really fascinating. There's one client here in Queensland that has started very in the last few years really rapidly changed, but they had a brand new chair, and the chair had a came from a neurodivergent background, so was very aware around this human side of things,
Mm.
but also had a fascination with technology. So I've been supporting them into incorporating technology into the boardroom. So they've brought in board software to help with the efficiency of the boardroom and the way documents are stored and meetings are run and efficiency sort of gains there. They've also sort of adopted a more tech-based learning structure as well. So they're doing a
Mm.
lot more online learning. So
Mm.
instead of everybody doing the same stuff, they're sort
Mm.
of understanding through the skills matrix. Well, and there's so many more online courses now available around the world very reasonably. They're sort of having this sort of choose your own adventure learning path. So that's sort
Mm.
of technology. And now, very recently, I've started working with them about how to bring AI into the boardroom, and the executive team are really excited about that. And we've showed them how they can enhance their decision making, do gap analysis, data analysis, ideation, communication tools, and using large language models and other AI things to enhance what they do and speed up what they do. At the same time, the chair's been working really hard on creating a very safe space for people. They've done deep dives around themselves and each other on retreats to help them not just get to know each other really well, but help them understand their own bias, where it comes from, how they filter information, because we all have different selective perception and different things on different things like that. So we're seeing there a group really try and elevate their own performance, but bringing this technology in to help do that. So it's like this exponential effect we're seeing on them, and they're such a confident group now, and the organization is going from strength to strength.
Fabulous. But therefore, a logical next question from my perspective for you is that what role should AI play inside a boardroom? And how do we prevent over reliance on technology?
Yeah, it's this is the one for the history books, isn't it? When we've had technological changes and we have, the internet came along and suddenly everybody thought, well, we're no longer going to have retain knowledge. We're going because we're always asking something. And I think there's always going to be the need for at this stage, again, without making predictions, let's not predict the death of the boardroom with
Yeah.
general intelligence or super intelligence from an AI perspective. Let's just base on what we know right now.
Mm.
AI should be there to inform, not dictate conversations. I
Yeah.
have seen too many people start losing the ability to ideate because they go straight to something and say, "Hey, I want to know this," or "Can you give me some ideas for this?" I've been victim of this myself, but the difference is you actually leapfrog where you might have spent hours and hours and hours, and then you could start disseminating the ideas that
Mm.
suddenly comes there. So everything, like anything in life,
Mm.
everything's about a healthy balance
Correct.
between enhancing what you do using AI but not becoming and acting on the findings or what it gives you, the information, checking the sources, stress testing everything it does, interpreting what it does, working with it a bit more. What I found, and I'll go back to the previous example. This is really interesting. This group that brought AI in to help them has actually increased their collaborative behavior. So, whilst they may be relying on it for ideation, what happens afterwards? The board is far more collaborative. They're actually discussing some of the things that come out from AI, which they're now working with. They've become far better at asking questions, but as a group as well. So, we can get really focused on AI limiting what we do, but I really want to focus on how AI is enhancing what we do. What we already naturally do, a
Mm,
lot of it's about saving time.
mm. Very well said. But Paul, would there be any concern about how would boards maintain ethical oversight once AI pervades the boardroom?
Like anything else,
Mm.
every board should have a code of ethics, should have a set of values.
Yeah.
One person's ethics is a different person's, values, whatever you want to call it. Like having come from an ethical investment background prior
Mm.
to sort of doing future directors, ethical decision making was such an interesting thing because not everybody can agree on what's right from wrong. But I
Mm.
think what's really important for boards is to make sure they have a framework, an ethical decision making framework. What is
Mm.
good? What is black? What's white? What's
Mm.
gray? And how do
Mm.
we make decisions around that?
Yeah.
And that's no different to anything they do. So, if you take before AI came along, one of the hard decisions boards have to make is trade off decisions between
Right.
different competing sets of stakeholders.
Mm.
So we have to keep our share price at a certain level or maintain profitability, but sales are slowing down. Do we have to cut costs, and does that mean firing people?
Yeah.
There's ethical dilemmas always existed.
Mm.
AI doesn't change that. AI is just
Mm.
another level of ethical decision making. Yes, there's some concerns around source material and all that sort of side of things, but that's for the AI companies to really be
Mm.
focused on.
Mm.
The biggest thing I think for boards is to really be conscious of data security.
Right.
And that's part of the education for them as well. What you don't want is to be letting your information get out there very easily and put into the hands of competitors or anything else like that. So cybersecurity is so important, as it always has been, and AI is just bringing that to the fore even more.
Well said. So I have time for two more questions for you.
Okay.
My next question is, what advice do you have for first-time board members navigating their early years in governance?
Yeah. Ask questions. Be that curious person who asks questions. And I think there's a real trick here because a lot of people say stay quiet, listen, spend a lot of time listening, and just don't speak up too much. I have a different approach to this, I think, and does come from privilege. I understand that, but asking as many questions as possible because you often find that these questions are questions others want to ask, but they've never wanted. They feel fearful to ask them. So try and behave without fear,
Mm.
and know that you probably will make mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
And it's like sort of the baby animals in the pack. You can get away with it for a certain amount until you've grown up.
Mm.
So when you're first time and you're in there early, as long as it's all done respectfully and
Mm.
you're not sucking up time and energy, but asking good questions, asking for clarification, really listening to responses and seeking to understand, you will build trust. You don't have to speak all the time, so be tactical about when you speak. And obviously, I've talked about just learning, just constantly be learning as much as possible.
Yeah. Well said. And my last question, what is the one piece of advice you would give to boards who are looking to future-proof themselves today?
Embrace change,
Hmm.
don't fear it.
Okay.
That's it. So stay curious.
Mm.
Understand you now live in a world of ambiguity. So you cannot control your decisions. All you can do is try and be intentional about the conditions that affect the decisions you're making. Seek out the best information, have the best discussions, find the right people, build the best team, bring in the right tools, be really thoughtful about making decisions, and then understand that we live in this volatile, uncertain, ambiguous world. So you cannot control the impact of your decisions
Mm.
and what will happen. A great decision done all the right way may not mean a great result. So hence embracing change and letting go of the status quo.
Mm. Well said. And on that
Thank
note,
you.
Paul, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about boardrooms, governance, and artificial intelligence. We covered a lot of ground today on what is a board futurist, what are some of the challenges boards face today. I loved your definitions of good governance versus great governance. We covered some mistakes board members could make. You also spoke to us about regulatory landscape and diversity, equity, inclusion. I loved your explanation of your own phrase, simultaneously more human and less human. And of course, then we covered some very interesting thoughts from you on artificial intelligence and boards. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Thank you so much. That was a pleasure. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the brand called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.